and welcome. My name is Svetlana Stone. You are watching Artist Voices, where we believe it's essential for artist voices to be heard. And we are pleased to have Henning Schröder here at Public Media Network to talk about what does it take to be a musician in the 21st century. Thank you for being with us. And Henning, thank you so much for coming to us, and we are eager to learn more about you and your music, your journey. Could you please tell us about yourself and how you get to Kalamazoo?
Yeah, thank you first of all for having me. I have a long-standing relationship with Kalamazoo. I've lived here on and off over the years. My medium is the saxophone. So I'm a musician. I came here as a student in 2001 for 1 year. I'm originally from Germany, so that was my first experience abroad. Came here, studied with Trent Kinniston at the time at Western Michigan University, and then went back home to finish a couple of degrees over there in Berlin. Then I worked in Indonesia for a few years. Came back here to Kalamazoo, finished my degree. Then I went to get my doctorate in Illinois. I was living here at the time, so I've lived several years in Kalamazoo. Then I went to Ohio to teach at university there for several years. And then together with my wife and my family, Julian Tay teaches piano at Western Michigan University. And so I came back and have been teaching at Western now since 2020, since the pandemic, essentially. So yeah, so teaching and performing is what I do with the saxophone.
And this is a classical, right? A classical.
Mostly classical, yeah. It's well, the saxophone is a fairly new and modern instrument, so the lines, the stylistic lines, are sometimes a little blurry. I have a little bit of a jazz background, but you know, I identify mostly as a classical saxophonist, and contemporary and new music, and but there's always a little bit of crossover into other areas also.
and why the saxophone? How old you were when you were introduced to the music, and how it's become your passion? And
yeah, I can't exactly say when that started, but I know that that was early as a kid. Early as a child, that I wanted to play the saxophone.
Is there some influence?
Yeah, I think so. There was always a lot of jazz in my house. My dad is a big jazz fan. He's both a classical violinist and a jazz violinist. So like me, he has a foot in both fields and in both styles. And
so he's a professional musician?
Well, he was a music teacher. He's not a professional musician as a performer. So I took a slightly different route with that when I started the saxophone. I was 10 when I started, because you know you don't start that early on the saxophone. So I was 10 when I started, and was immediately it was clear to me that that's what I'll do professionally. So, and here I am, you know, many years later, still doing it.
So. Saxophone is your passion, and as you mentioned, you came here in 2001 as a student.
Yes.
And being here and then coming as a student and coming back as a professor, what does it feel? Well, like, what's the differences between that experience and now being like a professor? Did you like being a student learn something that you would say, oh, I'm never going to do that, I'm going to do this, so my student would get better understanding of music?
Yeah, actually, that was a pivotal moment for me when I came here, because back in Germany, so most of my university and conservatory training was in Germany, and I essentially trained to be a classical saxophone performer. That was the goal. And when I came here, I essentially just came here because my wife Julian came here first, and then I followed. And what better way to spend time in a new country than, you know, starting a degree here too. So I did that, I immediately when coming here, I immediately diversified my skill set. because I was a graduate assistant here, but I didn't teach saxophone. I taught music theory. That's not something I ever thought I would do.
Interesting.
Growing up, or even in Germany, that was never a career path I saw for myself. And now over the years, I've accumulated a wide variety of different teaching skills in music theory and in music history. My doctorate is in saxophone performance, but my dissertation has an ethnomusicological bend to it, and so I've always had a general interest in music. So as much as I'm a specialist on the saxophone, I'm also a generalist because I teach in many areas. So at Western, I teach music theory, for example, music appreciation. In my previous position, I was the main music theory professor there, but I also taught the music history sequence in addition to studio saxophone. And so I have done a lot of things that I credit Western for, because I was exposed to these kinds of opportunities. And you said, how does that affect my teaching? It does in such a way that I recommend that my students also seek out other musical fields that they could also have an expertise in. It has two benefits. One is that you are more marketable on the job market later on if you know how to teach music theory, for example. There's more options for you to get a college teaching gig, for example. But the other thing is that I think as a performer, I'm influenced by all the other areas that I also work in. I think I'm a better performer for also being a music theorist and a historian. And I also think that my music theory teaching is influenced by my activities as a performer. So I find that these different fields, they inform one another in meaningful ways.
So this experience add to your performance, and performance add to your teaching experience.
Exactly.
So, and you said you advise your students who you teach now to be more I cannot say this word.
Yeah, I want them to kind of diversify.
Diversify rather than focus just on some particular instrument or the subject. So be open more to explore others.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to also be a specialist at something, to be to be really, really good at like one thing that few people can do. I think that's great, but then at the same time also make sure that you're not a one-trick pony and that's the only thing that you can do. So for example, I have sometimes music education students who also want to do performance and vice versa. Or I have music therapy students who want to also do performance. Or maybe you could have a background in music technology and also be a performer, or combine any aspect of the music industry into your portfolio, and add to your experience, but also to your marketability later on.
And you mentioned that you teach music appreciations. Could you tell more about this?
So I actually, this semester I do not teach that, but I have previously taught, at Western I've taught a class, a music appreciation class specifically about the symphony. So we explore symphonic music, and especially looking at all the different facets of the music industry and music business, music life and culture, questions of diversity and representation when looking at the genre of the symphony, for example, throughout the centuries and currently and what's happening. So there's a nice mix of things to look at through the lens of the symphony. And in my previous position in Ohio, I taught a more general music appreciation class for the general university population that was more a general overview of music history, especially Western music, but also some non-Western elements in there. And 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 aspects of form and analysis, a little bit of everything. So so that we have a musically literate public. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back for those of you who just tuned in. We are here at Public Media Network with Henning Schröder to learn about what does it take or mean to be a musician in the 21st century. Thank you for being with us. And thank you so much again for sharing with us your story. And you mentioned that your wife is also a musician.
Correct.
Is it correct?
Yes.
What kind of music or instrument she's playing?
She she also has she will not like that I'm saying this, but she also has a multifaceted background. She's in the Kalamazoo community mostly known as a pianist and as a piano professor, but back in Germany where we met, she also specialized in the recorder and did a lot of early music and has an artist diploma in recorded performance also. So she's also somebody who is a specialist in a couple of fields, but then also has a broad interest more generally. So I think we are similar in that regard. And yeah, she has her own passion projects, and there are certain things that we do together. We perform together as a duo and in other chamber music settings. And so it's nice that we can collaborate, and when we're not collaborating, at least understand what the other one is doing or attempting to do. So, yeah.
And how is it like have two musicians in the family? Mm-hmm. What kind of like challenges you facing as a musicians? Because like you said, you're performing. It's great to see like your wife accompany you are playing, but to bring even this program together, what kind of like maybe obstacles or something that people don't know that musician may face?
Yeah, there's a few things that come to mind. One is, of course, as a musician, we don't always have a steady professional path. So there are times in our professional lives where it was maybe we didn't have as steady an income to always have food on the table and to have our kids go to good schools and that kind of stuff. And we've always managed, but there were some scary moments along the way. And so now we have a bit more of a stable situation, but that wasn't always the case. And then for us both as performers, for example, last weekend we went to Canada for a recital, and we don't do these things a lot anymore because then we have to leave the kids at home alone.
That's true.
So finding time to rehearse together when both of us have to be away from the kids and then touring and that kind of stuff, that is challenging if you have a family. And it's rewarding in other ways, of course, but that sometimes then the music takes the back seat, at least while the kids are still a little bit smaller. And so yeah, those are some challenges. I don't even want to call it challenges. Those are just logistical things to consider. That if both parents or both spouses are musicians, that can sometimes be a little bit tricky to navigate.
So, and what the best advice you got from other musician and you still kind of follow it and pass it to your students?
That's a good question. I think I don't know if that's any particular advice that anybody's given me, but from seeing mentors and other people that I'm close to that are also musicians, I take inspiration from that. Not necessarily in what they say, but in what kind of models they are for me and for their students. And so the most important thing for me is that, like I said, there's some challenges in being a musician. I, for one, have never once regretted the choice of making that my career, because I think when you're passionate about it, then you find a way to do it. And that's what I see in some of my role models that are also, are really hardworking. They are dedicated to their art and to their students. And I think, you know, paying that forward is something that I also like to do, you know, just instilling that in my students. And that comes from watching, you know, my mentors and seeing what they do. So.
Yeah, that's very, I think, very powerful when you say if you're passionate about this, you find the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. And could you please share your information about how people can find information about your future performance, maybe your website, so they can follow you and find more information?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that you mentioned the website. That's under construction right now, so I will have that up. I can maybe send you the link to that. So I don't have that ready to go. I can be found on the Western Michigan University homepage as one of the Woodwind faculty there as the classical saxophonist. I am also visible with my quartet. It's called Capital Quartet.
Is it also has a website or something?
Yeah, there's a website there. That's capitalquartet.com, and capital is with an O, right? CAPITOL quartet.com. That's a saxophone quartet in which I play the baritone saxophone. And so we have things coming up with that ensemble. Throughout the year, I always have a few things. And another thing that I do over the summer is I'm always in North Carolina at the Brevard Music Institute. I'm one of the faculty members there. There's a lot of performing and teaching going on there always over the summer. And I'm on that website also. And there's the occasional video or recording that people can find of my performing. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you being with us and sharing your story. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this concludes this episode of Artist Voices. We are so thankful for being our guest, Henning Schröder, and sharing his information about music and his passion. So, and thank you so much for watching us here at Public Media Network, where we believe it's essential for artist voices to be heard. And see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.